From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The Chancellor paves the way for manifesto-busting tax rises later this month as she rules out other ways to fill her budget black hole.
As Chancellor, I have to face the world as it is, not the world that I want it to be. And when challenges come our way, the only question is how to respond to them.
Today is a really big moment. The Chancellor laying the groundwork for really big tax rises, having said only a year ago she wasn't coming back for more. And while no decisions, I'm told, have been taken, the writing is on the wall.
Also tonight, the brother of the Southport attacker tells an inquiry he feared Axel Rudakabana would kill a member of his family. The US braces for the results of a series of votes from New York to California that will provide the electorate's first verdict on Donald Trump's presidency. Tributes are paid to Dick Cheney, the former US vice president who has died at the age of 84 after decades of service and controversy. Plus,
to receive the honour of knighthood, Sir David Beckham, for services to sport and to charity.
From Leytonstone to Windsor, the former England football captain finally gets his knighthood and bends it like Beckham. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That is coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. In the weeks before a budget, it is traditional for chancellors to take a vow of silence about the measures they're planning to introduce. This morning, Rachel Reeves broke with that tradition, using a news conference to give her strongest indication yet that difficult decisions, including potential tax rises, are on the cards. That could mean breaking manifesto pledges made only last year. The Chancellor made clear that the blame for the state of the public finances belongs elsewhere and that she would take the decisions necessary to bring growth to the economy. Here's our political editor, Beth Rigby.
This is a once-in-a-parliament budget to wipe the slate clean. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
The Chancellor last year with a bombshell budget raising tens of billions in tax, promising it was a one-off. Until today, 3 weeks before the next budget, the Chancellor breaking cover as she prepares the ground to break promises made to voters.
If we are to build the future of Britain together, we will all have to contribute to that effort. Each of us must do our bit for the security of our country and the brightness of its future.
Each of us must do our bit. A message to you that your taxes could be going up. The Chancellor considering an income tax hike to help fill an estimated £30 billion black hole in the public finances, arguing that her alternatives, cutting public spending or increasing borrowing, are worse.
Austerity, reckless borrowing, made-up numbers. They are the problems, not the solutions. They are the mistakes of the past which would only take us backwards. I will not repeat them.
Laying the ground for a massive manifesto breach, the Chancellor sought to shift the blame onto global headwinds and previous Conservative governments. You told me explicitly Labour would stick to our manifesto commitment not to increase taxes that working people pay. Today, do you still stand by both those promises? And if you can't or if you won't, aren't you making a mockery of the voters that put their trust in you at the general election?
Today is about setting the context for that budget. And your viewers can see the challenges that we face, but the challenges that are on a global nature. And they can also see the challenges in the long-term performance of our economy. As Chancellor, I have to face the world as it is, not the world that I want it to be. And when challenges come our way, the only question is how to respond to them.
Will Labour's budget mean higher taxes, Minister? Why should anyone trust Labour on tax?
Ministers facing hard questions as they headed to Cabinet after the Chancellor's speech, bracing for the backlash that will come should the government break election promises. The current Tory leader leading the charge.
If this was to do with us, why has unemployment risen every single month since Labour came into office? Going back and saying, oh, actually, what happened in 2010 is the reason why we have problems in 2025, quite frankly, doesn't wash. Blame the OBR, blame the last government, blame the mini-budget, blame everybody except herself. This woman needs to take responsibility.
Today is a really big moment. The Chancellor laying the groundwork for really big tax rises, having said only a year ago she wasn't coming back for more. And while no decisions, I'm told, have been taken, the writing is on the wall. Taxes will be going up and perhaps income tax will go up too. Now, that would be a clear manifesto breach. It will bring acute political pain. But the Chancellor's decided her other options, increasing borrowing or cutting public spending, will hurt more. This is, if you like, a make or break moment for this Chancellor and this government, but insiders tell me they think it's a risk they have to take. Labour ran its election campaign promising to fix the economy and make people feel better off. Those promises seem further away than ever as the clock on this government runs down. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, has been taking a look at the reasons why the Chancellor is hedging her bets going into the budget and who might pay more tax.
Now, the Chancellor has issued a warning about the budget's potential for higher taxes in the future. Why is this? Well, it largely comes back to the fact that she has got these fiscal rules. She set herself these rules. And one of the rules, perhaps the most important, is that she needs to get this. So this is the current budget, the kind of total amount of extra spending minus all of the taxes coming in, that she has going out in the future years. She needs to get it up into a surplus, basically. And at the moment, this is the final year of the forecast horizon, at the moment, she's heading for a surplus of £9.9 billion, or she was last time she did the numbers. But here's what's the issue, OK? So there's lots of talk at the moment about headroom. That's basically headroom. So it's the headroom against the fiscal rules. And she had £9.9 billion back in March, but then, of course, events intruded. So all sorts of things have been happening since then. For one thing, there's higher debt interest costs for the UK. So out there in markets, we're having to pay higher debt interest. That grinds it down because you have to spend a little bit more money on those interest payments. On top of that, that brings the kind of amount of headroom down. On top of that, you've got all those U-turns that we know about. So welfare, winter fuel, that costs a lot of money, about £10 billion all told. So now you're down, and the headroom is gone. You're in negative territory. The rules have been broken, but things get even worse than that because there were extra commitments that Keir Starmer has already said he's minded to do. So the two-child policy, that costs quite a lot of money, and a few other things as well, £5 billion. And you can see this gets smaller and smaller, rather kind of the shortfall gets bigger and bigger. And then on top of all of that, perhaps the biggest thing is the Office for Budget Responsibility is about to update its forecasts for how the UK economy is doing. It's saying we've got lower productivity than expected. That means less tax revenue coming in. Lo and behold, that's another potential £10 billion. So all of a sudden, what was £9.9 billion, about £10 billion, has become minus £17 billion. Now, this is just kind of rough rule of thumb, but the point is, if you want to get back from there to £10 billion, it's a lot of money. It's £27 billion. And if you want to get back to something like £20 billion, so, to have more headroom and to try and ensure this doesn't happen all over again, that's the best part of £40 billion. But even if it's the short one, even if it's kind of about £30 billion, it raises the question, how on earth do you get to that £30 billion to fill the hole? And the short answer is, if you're not doing the big things like raising the basic rate of income tax or VAT, it's really quite tricky. So you could reduce the 2029-30 spending. There's no kind of concrete plan on spending by the end of this decade. So you could kind of reduce that, brings in kind of maybe about £5 billion. You could bring in about £8 billion by freezing those personal tax allowances that she unfroze in her first budget. Again, kind of unpopular, but it's not technically raising the tax rate. But you can see, look, and you've got other bits and pieces. You can have a higher rate of council tax. Doesn't raise all that much money. You can have closing CGT loopholes, might raise a little bit more, but you can see the bar isn't going up very quickly. Charge LNPs, limited liability partners, charge them national insurance. And gradually, things like gambling taxes, things like potentially higher rate income tax, they build this up, but it doesn't get to the £30 billion. And that is the issue for the Chancellor right now. She's facing the gap, even with all of those extra little fiddly things she could do, between that and where she needs to get, which is why a lot of people think that might have to be bridged, potentially with those controversial income tax increases.
Ed Conway there with his analysis. The brother of the Southport attacker has told a public inquiry that he feared Axel Rudakabana would kill a member of his family. Dion Rudakabana said his younger sibling got increasingly more violent after being expelled from school, saying he reminded him of the sociopathic murderer from the film No Country for Old Men. Rudakabana was 17 when he murdered 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in July of last year. Our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, has this report.
We know what violence Axel Rudakabana was capable of because of that day last July in Southport, when a taxi took him to a dance studio and 3 young girls lost their lives in his murderous attack. But his brother said that violence started many years before. This is the first time we've heard from Dion Rudakabana. When he was 12 years old, he was diagnosed with a medical condition that meant both brothers had to move school. Axel Rudakabana resented moving away from his friends, and that resentment played out in violent outbursts towards his brother and the rest of the family. The violence increased in intensity. In a message to a friend, he wrote, "There's not much that can be done as he is rather strong. Too much damage would be caused by my dad trying to restrain him, and the risk of him doing something potentially fatal is the major concern." In evidence to the inquiry, he said, "I remember being scared someone was going to die, my dad." The inquiry heard another message. "My brother doesn't really show mercy, so my dad just has to try not to die. We hide knives to mitigate that factor." But on his brother's motives for the violence at home, he told the inquiry it wasn't just being viewed as being naughty. He was struggling to manage in his situation, and it was frustrating, and he lashed out. Dion Rudakabana said that by the time his brother was 13, their parents had lost control of him. He compared him to a character in the movie No Country for Old Men, a sociopath who went on to kill. That's what concerned me, he said. The brothers' last interaction came when Axel Rudakabana threw a metal bottle at his brother's head. He missed, but the two have never spoken since. It was a year later that Axel Rudakabana did kill. On such an atrocity, his brother will continue trying to provide some answers tomorrow. Greg Milam, Sky News, Liverpool.
The race to become mayor of New York will be decided in the early hours of tomorrow morning, just one of a number of contests which could influence the direction of US politics over the next 3 years and give a verdict on Donald Trump's presidency, 1 year on, of course, from his own election win this time last year. Well, the most high-profile race is in New York. The Democrat candidate, Zohran Mamdani, is the front-runner. He faces Republican Curtis Sliwa, as well as independent candidate Andrew Cuomo, who Donald Trump is urging voters to back. Well, the president is threatening to cut federal funds to his home city if Mr. Mamdani wins. Well, let's go live to New York now. Our US correspondent, James Matthews. Not long to go then, James, I guess, but that New York race, just the most high profile of the contest tonight that will show us how the political wind is blowing there.
Yeah, hi, and a fascinating night tonight. It's the first time that a substantial number of Americans across this country have had the chance to have their say on Trump 2.0, something of a referendum. A fascinating contest, as you say, here in New York. Zohran Mamdani, born in Africa, came here when he was age 7. If he wins, and he's tipped to win, the bouquets and polls have him way out in front, he would be New York's first Muslim mayor. A controversial figure in many ways in his past. He has been critical of Israel, has called for a defunding of the police, decriminalization of prostitution and the closure of New York City jails. He's been accused of being anti-Semitic. That is absolutely not backed by him. He denies that completely. So Donald Trump, you know, he talks about not channeling federal funds towards New York if Mamdani wins. The consensus is that Donald Trump actually would quite enjoy a victory by the 34-year-old candidate, because that would be grounds for the Republicans saying, look, this is a party that is shifting to the radical left. They're already framing it that way, Trump calling Mamdani a communist and so on. So we'll see how that develops tonight. Fascinating contests elsewhere as well. Contest to be the governor in Virginia and in New Jersey. In terms of the demographics, the various demographics and how they will vote, that is interesting. The Hispanic vote, for example, black men, how will they vote? Demographics that put Donald Trump back into the White House, pushed him over the line. How will Hispanics react to what they've seen over the past 9 months? A hardening of immigration policy, ICE raids in the street, and so on. So something of a referendum, and important in terms of how it reflects where Donald Trump stands today and how he might stand next year in the midterms, and of course, as we get towards 2028, the election.
Look forward to more analysis from you. James, thanks very much indeed. Now, the Post Office campaigner Sir Alan Bates has reached a 7-figure deal to settle his claim over the Post Office Horizon scandal, more than 20 years after he began campaigning over what turned into one of Britain's biggest miscarriages of justice. Sir Alan was among hundreds of sub-postmasters who were wrongfully accused by the Post Office and prosecuted for theft and false accounting. Well, the accounting software Horizon, which was made by Fujitsu, incorrectly generated financial shortfalls, making it appear as though money was missing from post offices across the UK. Train operator LNER has praised the bravery of one of its workers who helped save lives during the stabbing attack on one of its trains in Cambridgeshire on Saturday evening. Samir Zitouni was working on board the Doncaster to London service as a customer experience host. He was injured in the attack and remains in hospital. The far-right activist Tommy Robinson has been found not guilty of a terror offence. Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, was accused of failing to provide police with access to his mobile phone when he was stopped at the border with thousands of pounds in cash last year. A judge found the decision to stop him appeared to be because of his political views and was therefore unlawful. Well, let's move to Sudan now, and the country's UK ambassador has told Sky News the crisis around al-Fasher is getting worse as thousands are targeted in killing fields around the city. The ambassador claimed the paramilitary rapid support forces who have seized the city should be treated as terrorists. Here is our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn.
It is the conflict the world said could never be allowed to repeat itself. But 20 years on in Darfur, that is exactly what is happening. And in London today, a stark warning from Sudan's ambassador. Another genocide is underway and a plea for the world to intervene.
This ground invasion of al-Fasher is just the last stage of an elaborate and well-calculated and comprehensive genocidal design.
Horrific images and reports are emerging following the fall of the city of al-Fasher to RSF paramilitary forces. As many as 6,000 people are thought to have died in 4 days. Here a man pleads for his life before being shot dead in cold blood. Tens of thousands have been forced to flee. Today, more allegations that the United Arab Emirates is supporting the RSF and calls for Britain to rein in its Gulf ally.
The need for intervention to, putting pressure on the enabler of this ongoing genocide and to take a firm, united position against that.
Who is the enabler?
It is no secret that the Janjaweed, the source of their armament and their the mercenaries and the logistical support and everything is coming through the UAE.
The United Arab Emirates?
Yes.
The UAE says it doesn't support any of the factions in Sudan's civil war, but mounting evidence suggests otherwise. The British government says what's happening in Darfur is truly horrifying and it's committing £5 million more to avert what it says is one of the worst humanitarian crises in the 21st century. Its critics and the Sudanese government say without more intervention from the UK and other countries, that crisis will only become even worse. For members of Britain's Sudanese community like Dr. Hashim Mukhtar, who has family in al-Fasher, enough is enough.
We've got our land and we want to protect it. Leave us alone. Stop supporting the Janjaweed, the RSF, and please, British government, put your pressure, put your leverage on the United Arab Emirates to get off our backs because we can't have it anymore.
For 18 months, the people of al-Fasher were besieged and starved, and the world did not intervene. With their city now fallen, there is still no sign of that changing. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, we've had a response to those claims from the United Arab Emirates, with an official saying, we categorically reject any claims of providing any form of support to either warring party since the onset of the civil war, and condemn atrocities committed by both Port Sudan Authority and RSF. The latest UN panel of experts report makes clear that there is no substantiated evidence that the UAE has provided any support to RSF or has any involvement in the conflict. Well, to the war in Ukraine now, and Sky News has found the use of drones is becoming ever more prevalent as Russia increases attacks to overwhelm defences. So far this year, Russia has launched more than 44,000 Shahid-type drones, 4 times the total of 2024. Around 64% were destroyed this year, down from 68%, as the scale of attack stretches Ukraine's air defences. Data collected by the UN show that from January to September 2025, at least 494 Ukrainian civilians were killed by missiles and so-called suicide drones like the Shahids. But as our international correspondent, John Sparks, reports, Kyiv is fighting back with an anti-drone battalion using 3D printed devices to counter the threat.
Yeah, just follow us and be careful.
These men are the hunters, the interceptors, the last line of defense against a notorious Russian weapon called the Shahed. Members of Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade, they run their operation from a former vegetable store. But what they're doing is pushing the boundaries of war.
If we talk about this drone, the first successful destruction of Shahed was like 2 months ago.
2 months ago?
2 months ago.
Their tool of choice is this first-person view drone with C4 explosives packed in the cap. And it's been designed to do something about this. The menacing whine of a Shahed drone is familiar to everyone in Ukraine, as are the consequences. Earlier this month, they hit a kindergarten in the city of Kharkiv with 3 of these kamikaze-style weapons. At the air defense outpost, the mood changed in an instant. With a Shahed approaching our location, the interceptor was prepared for launch. The radar has given them an indication of where to look, but it's not precise. So they have to use the interceptor's thermal camera. The heat from the Shahed's engine should generate a speck or dot on the horizon. And a navigator called Magic spots it on the screen. The pilot, Pataha, maneuvers the interceptor behind the Russian drone. And as he moves in, he prepares to detonate his device.
Шахед. Есть, отработали.
It's going to be a busy night. They can hear one outside. They can hear it. Now they're looking on the radar. Ready to launch. Both sides are competing in a high-tech arms race, with the Russians constantly updating their Shaheds. More speed, better range, even autonomous control. To avoid interception, some can change course in mid-air. The pilot has missed the target and goes round for another try.
Двигайся за ним. Да. Вижу, вижу, вижу. Рядышком. Да.
Приближается в нашу сторону.
The drone was destroyed and the tension released.
Сюда!
The unit was running out of interceptors, and we watched as they hurriedly assembled some more. The Russians are now manufacturing some 5,000 Shaheds per month.
It's not possible now to teach every crew in this moment for intercepting Shaheds, but in few months, like 3 to 5, it will be possible to destroy most of them.
These men are resourceful and driven as they fight on a very different sort of battlefield. But the Russians are sticking to a simple strategy to terrify the people of Ukraine. John Sparks, Sky News.
The former US Vice President Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84. He was the 46th Vice President and served under George W. Bush, having also served as Defense Secretary under George Bush Sr. Our US correspondent, David Blevins, has been looking back at his controversial time in public life.
I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
He was sworn in as Vice President, but was to many the power behind the throne. Rising from youngest ever White House Chief of Staff under Gerald Ford to become George Bush Sr.'s defence secretary and ultimately running mate for George W.
I am proud to have Dick Cheney by my side, and America will be proud to have him as our next vice president.
As Defence Secretary, he'd overseen Operation Desert Storm, the US-led campaign to oust Iraqi forces from Kuwait.
3 o'clock Thursday morning in the Gulf, the armed forces of the United States began an operation at the direction of the president.
And when al-Qaeda attacked America on 9/11, the new vice president led the response. An architect of the war on terror, leading the charge on claims that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, now known to be false.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use them against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
If his defence of enhanced interrogation methods was controversial, his push for that invasion of Iraq was disastrous.
He'll mostly be remembered for the difficult war on terror, especially the mistake going into Iraq and the execution of that war. But I do think he'll be remembered, at least in the States, in the U.S., for his longer legacy or his longer time in and around government.
He faced scrutiny over claims that Halliburton, the energy giant he once led, had profited from government contracts in Iraq. There were personal setbacks too, an embarrassing quail hunting accident when he shot and wounded his friend Harry Whittington. For a man long accused of overstepping constitutional boundaries himself, he had become an unlikely critic of President Trump, publicly endorsing Kamala Harris.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump.
And questions about the funeral drew this curt response from the White House.
I don't believe the White House is involved in that planning, or at least hasn't gotten to it yet. I know the president is aware of the former vice president's passing, and as you saw, flags have been lowered to half staff in accordance with statutory law.
A paradox of power and controversy. Dick Cheney leaves a complex legacy as the most consequential vice president in modern US history. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Prince William is on day 2 of his Brazil trip and visited a protected area close to Rio de Janeiro. The Prince of Wales travelled by boat to Guanabara Bay and explored the mangroves, which provide a range of environmental benefits, from storing carbon to acting as shelters for marine life and shielding coastlines from storms. The former England football captain, David Beckham, has received his knighthood at Windsor Castle today.
To receive the honour of knighthood, Sir David Beckham, for services to sport and to charity.
Well, he was knighted by the King with his wife Lady Victoria and his parents watching on. The former Manchester United and Real Madrid midfielder was named in the King's birthday honours for services to sport and to charity. Well, Sir David has worked with humanitarian aid organisation UNICEF since 2005 and played a leading role in London's bid for the 2012 Olympics. Well, speaking to Sky News, he described his emotions at receiving the accolade.
I'm very proud to have, had such a special honour given to me. I grew up in a very humble background in the East End of London, always wanting to be a professional footballer, and then I'm stood here at Windsor Castle with the most important monarchy in the world and getting a knighthood, so it doesn't get much better.
Well, it's been a great night for Premier League clubs in the Champions League. Liverpool, Spurs and Arsenal all winning their respective league stage matches. So Liverpool, first of all, beat Real Madrid 1-0 at Anfield. Alexis McAllister headed in the winner with just about half an hour to go. Trent Alexander-Arnold was booed on his first return to Anfield since his summer move to Madrid. Spurs, meantime, thrashed Copenhagen 4-0 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Brennan Johnson scored the opener before getting sent off in the 57th minute. And Arsenal's 15-year-old Max Daumann became the youngest player to play in the Champions League as they won 3-0 at Slavia Prague. Bukayo Saka scored the opener from the spot before Mikel Merino scored 2 second-half goals. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we will be taking a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the PR consultant, Alex Dean, and the journalist and author, Christina Patterson. Well, among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of the Mirror. Its headline, "Make it fair, Rachel," as the Chancellor refuses to rule out tax rises in the upcoming budget. That and plenty more after this.